June 13, 1944. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen, 29th Infantry Division, aged 23, from Sacramento, California, former auto mechanic who'd promised his mother he'd fix her Buick when he got home, watches his platoon move through a narrow Norman lane. Hedgerows tower 15 feet on both sides, centuries-old earth banks thick with roots, topped with brambles so dense you can't see 3 feet in. The lane ahead looks empty. In the next 20 minutes, you'll see how German Panzergrenadiers turned ancient farming boundaries into a killing machine that produced 94 American casualties in 9 minutes, and how one desperate assault changed Bocage warfare doctrine forever. Chen had been in France 4 days. He'd already learned the Bocage wasn't like any terrain in the training manuals. These weren't hedges, they were walls. Stone and earth compacted over centuries, roots woven so tight a tank couldn't push through. The 29th had lost 47 men in 2 days learning this. Now they moved slow, rifles up, every man scanning. The intelligence brief that morning had been clear. Light German resistance in this sector, pulled back to Carentan yesterday. The lane was supposed to be clear. It wasn't. Behind the hedgerow, 100 yards ahead, Obergefreiter Klaus Weber, 352nd Infantry Division, aged 26, from Hamburg, former factory foreman who kept a photo of his daughter in his helmet, had positioned his MG-42 machine gun with obsessive care. 9 hours motionless in the mud, every measurement perfect, every sightline calculated. He'd done this 17 times in 3 weeks. American casualties so far, 213. His tally, 47 confirmed. He knew Americans moved in column formation on these narrow lanes. He knew they bunched up. Today would be different. Today, the numbers would break everything. Chen's company, Baker Company, 116th Infantry Regiment, numbered 138 men that morning. They were strung out in column along 400 meters of lane. Standard formation for Bocage terrain where you couldn't deploy laterally. Hedgerows prevented it. Subscribe for 20-minute historical deep dives that change how you see warfare. 2 videos every day. Chen's platoon, 43 men, entered the kill zone at 14:32 hours. Temperature 21 degrees Celsius. Visibility in the lane, excellent. Visibility through hedgerows, 0. Weber watched through his firing port, a gap cut precisely at ground level, invisible from the lane. He counted. 38 Americans in the open. Perfect. His assistant gunner, Schütze Hans Meyer from Berlin, aged 19, had the 50-round belt loaded. Weber's finger rested on the trigger. The tactical equation was brutal. Attackers exposed versus defenders invisible. At 14:33:47, Weber squeezed. The MG-42 fired at 1/200 rounds per minute. The first burst, 5 seconds, 100 rounds, cut through the column like a scythe. Private James Morrison, aged 20, from Atlanta, who'd been talking about his girlfriend minutes earlier, went down without sound. Then Corporal David Wilson, aged 24, from Chicago, who'd shared his last cigarette that morning. Then 6 more men faster than thought processes. The lane erupted chaos. Men scattered, but hedgerows trapped them, nowhere to go. Weber traversed left to right, methodical, brutal. Meyer fed the second belt without pause. Chen hit the ground, pressed into the hedgerow base. The earth offered no cover, compressed by centuries, root-bound, impossible to dig. He could hear screaming. He could hear that MG-42 buzzsaw sound that would haunt survivors forever. Sergeant Thomas Bradley, platoon leader, age 31, from Boston, tried to organize return fire. Bradley had survived North Africa, Sicily, Omaha Beach. He'd never encountered this. Then the second MG-42 opened fire. Gefreiter Ernst Hoffmann, aged 28, from Munich, former schoolteacher, had waited for this. His position was on the left hedgerow, 50 meters behind Weber's gun, offset to create crossfire. His field of fire covered Americans trying to withdraw. He fired at 14:34:18. The geometry was perfect. Americans moving forward died to Weber. Americans moving back died to Hoffman. Americans staying still died to both. The numbers tell everything. First minute, 60 seconds, 43 casualties, 100%. Every man killed or wounded. Chen survived because he'd pressed into a shallow depression where a root created 8 inches of cover, while men 3 feet away died. Bradley was still trying to organize when Hoffman's gun found him at 14:34:52. The platoon had no leadership, just soldiers trying to survive the impossible. If you're understanding how devastating this was, hit that like button. This ambush rewrote American doctrine. But here's what intelligence reports never captured: the human cost that statistics can't measure. Staff Sergeant Chen lay in that depression for 6 minutes. 6 minutes listening to his platoon die. 6 minutes unable to move because any movement drew fire. He could hear Private Michael Torres, age 19 from Texas, calling for his mother 50 feet away. Torres had shown Chen photos of his family that morning. 3 younger sisters, parents who owned a small restaurant. Torres called for his mother for 4 minutes, then stopped. Chen heard the exact moment Torres died, the sound a human makes when they give up, when hope ends. Chen would hear that sound every night for the next 40 years. He never spoke about it. His wife would find him awake at 3 a.m., sitting in darkness, listening to something only he could hear. The war ended in 1945. For Chen, it never ended. It just got quieter. 2nd Platoon, commanded by Lieutenant James Anderson, age 24 from Portland, Oregon, former high school teacher engaged to Sarah Mitchell, was 200 meters behind when the firing started. Anderson kept a pocket journal. June 13th entry, written at 600 hours that morning. Norman countryside beautiful, reminds me of Sarah's storybooks. Everything green, everything old, everything hiding something. At 14:34 hours, he heard the MG-42s. He knew 1st Platoon was dying. He had to make a decision that would define his entire war. Move forward to support them, standard doctrine, but that meant entering the same kill zone, destroying 1st Platoon, or hold position, identify German positions, coordinate flanking attack. That would take time 1st Platoon didn't have. Anderson had 41 men. He moved forward. At 14:36:12, Anderson's lead squad, Sergeant Michael O'Connor, age 27 from Philadelphia, 9 men, reached a bend 50 meters behind Chen's position. O'Connor saw bodies in the lane ahead. He heard both MG-42s alternating bursts. He signaled back, heavy casualties, multiple machine guns, no visible positions. Anderson couldn't advance down the lane. Suicide. He couldn't withdraw, 1st Platoon still in contact. He needed to locate German positions and eliminate them. That meant moving through the hedgerows themselves. The problem, hedgerows were nearly impenetrable. Germans on the other side would hear you coming. Anderson sent O'Connor's squad to probe the right hedgerow, sent Corporal Raymond Foster's squad, 8 men, to probe the left, kept the rest in reserve. Time, 14:37:30. Weber and Hoffman had been firing for 3 minutes 43 seconds. 1st Platoon casualties, 43 confirmed. O'Connor found a gap, a farm gate, overgrown but passable, led into a small field, 30 meters square, surrounded by hedgerows. He moved his squad through. 6 steps in, the 3rd MG-42 opened fire. Unteroffizier Franz Schmidt, age 32 from Dresden, former engineer who designed factory assembly lines, had positioned his gun to cover this exact field. Let Americans find the gaps. Let them think they'd found a flanking route, then kill them in confined space. The field was a trap. Schmidt's first burst killed 3 men immediately. The remaining 6 scattered, but hedgerows trapped them exactly like the lane trapped 1st Platoon. At 14:38:15, O'Connor's entire squad was casualties. 9 men, 45 seconds. Tell me in the comments, could you make Anderson's decision knowing every choice led to casualties? Anderson heard O'Connor's squad die. The sound told him everything. Foster's squad on the left was still probing. Anderson now understood. Germans had created layered defense, multiple machine gun positions, mutually supporting, covering all approaches. The intelligence brief said, Germans pulled back yesterday. Either intelligence was wrong, or this was planned ambush, using retrograde as deception. At 14:39:47, Foster's squad found what looked like a flanking position, elevated ground overlooking the lane. Foster, age 23 from Detroit, former factory worker who'd built tanks, moved his 8 men through. They emerged onto a slight rise, could see down into the lane where 1st Platoon's bodies lay. Foster thought he could see Weber's position. He was preparing to engage when the 4th MG-42 opened fire. Gefreiter Otto Richter, age 25 from Berlin, former postal worker, had been waiting. He'd watched Americans discover this flanking route 3 times before. Each time he'd waited until they committed, thought they had advantage, then killed them. Foster's squad lasted 30 seconds, 8 men, all casualties. The German defensive system was complete. 4 MG-42 positions, interlocking fields of fire, covering primary lane and all flanking approaches. Americans trapped in a tactical box with no exit. Anderson's situation was impossible. 1st Platoon destroyed, O'Connor's squad destroyed, Foster's squad destroyed. 26 men committed, 26 casualties. He had 15 remaining. Couldn't advance. Every approach covered. Couldn't withdraw. 1st Platoon's wounded, still in the lane, still alive, screaming. Couldn't call artillery, no fire support. Couldn't call tanks. They couldn't reach this position. Alone, with 15 riflemen facing prepared German defense that had just killed 85 Americans in 6 minutes. The numbers were devastating. 4 MG-42s firing 200 rounds per minute each, 4,800 rounds per minute combined firepower, versus American M1 Garands firing 40-50 rounds per minute sustained. Firepower ratio 100-1. Germans had terrain advantage. Concealed positions, pre-sighted fields of fire, interlocking coverage. Americans had courage. It wasn't enough. Weber, watching through his firing port, saw the Americans had stopped moving. He'd been in combat long enough to recognize the pause. When enemy realizes they're beaten, when tactical options collapse into survival. He'd seen it before with British infantry. French resistance, now Americans, pattern always identical, aggressive advance, heavy casualties, tactical paralysis, withdrawal or surrender. He expected withdrawal. He was wrong. Anderson was reading his journal. Last entry, Norman countryside beautiful. He added 1 line, 1440 hours, 85 casualties, 4 MG-42s, no support, making final push. He knew this was likely his last entry. He didn't care. His men were dying in that lane. He gathered his remaining 15 soldiers, explained the situation clearly. 4 machine gun positions, all avenues covered, probable death for anyone advancing. Then he asked for volunteers to assault Weber's position. All 15 volunteered. They didn't laugh. They didn't cheer. They checked weapons, redistributed ammunition, prepared. Anderson saw Private Thomas Chen, Robert Chen's younger brother, age 21 from Sacramento, who'd enlisted the same day as Robert, who'd promised their mother both brothers would come home. Thomas had been in 2nd Platoon. He'd heard the firing that killed his brother's platoon. He knew Robert was likely dead in that lane. His face showed nothing. He checked his rifle, loaded a fresh clip, waited. At 14:42:30, Anderson led 15 men forward. They didn't use the lane. That was suicide. They moved through the hedgerow itself, using grenades to blast gaps, forcing through roots and earth and brambles. The noise was enormous. Explosions, shouting, branches breaking. Weber heard them coming. The Americans were making frontal assault through impassable terrain against prepared position. German doctrine said this was impossible. Hedgerows themselves were defensive barriers. Americans were proving doctrine wrong through sheer violence. Anderson's squad reached the hedgerow where Weber's position was concealed, 5 meters away, close enough to throw grenades. Private First Class Anthony Martinez, age 22, from Los Angeles, former baseball pitcher who could throw accurately at 40 meters, threw 3 grenades rapid succession. First landed short, second landed behind, third landed exactly on target, directly in Weber's firing port. Weber saw the grenade. 2 seconds. Meyer, his assistant gunner, threw himself on it. Explosion killed Meyer instantly. Blast wounded Weber, shrapnel in left arm and face. His MG-42 was undamaged, but he couldn't operate it alone. He pulled back, abandoned position. First German gun silenced, but the cost was brutal. Anderson's assault drew fire from 3 remaining German positions. Of 15 men who advanced, 9 were casualties by the time they neutralized Weber's gun. Anderson himself was wounded, bullet through left shoulder at 14:43:15. He kept fighting. Remaining 6 Americans consolidated at Weber's abandoned position. They had a foothold. Thomas Chen was among survivors. If you've stayed this long, you understand why these 20-minute deep dives matter. Hit subscribe, because the impossible part is still coming. Thomas Chen found his brother's body in the lane 30 meters away. Robert was dead. A single bullet through chest, killed instantly at 14:33:50, one of the first casualties when Weber opened fire. Thomas knelt there for 10 seconds, longer than tactically sound, but he didn't care. He closed his brother's eyes. He took the letter Robert had been writing to their mother, unfinished, blood-stained, still in Robert's pocket, folded it carefully, put it in his own pocket, then kept moving, kept searching for wounded, kept fighting, because stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant breaking. Breaking meant dying, so he kept moving. Hoffmann, commanding 2nd MG-42, saw Weber's position fall. German doctrine for this situation: immediate counterattack to restore defensive line or withdrawal to secondary positions. He had no reinforcements. At 14:44 said he and his team pulled back 50 meters to pre-prepared fallback position. Schmidt and Richter monitored Hoffmann's withdrawal, did the same. German defensive line contracted. Americans had won tactical victory, breached initial defensive line, but at catastrophic cost. Baker Company started the engagement with 138 men. After 9 minutes of combat, casualties numbered 94, dead and wounded, 68% casualties in 9 minutes. Combat ineffective by any military standard. But Anderson, wounded and down to 34 able soldiers, wasn't stopping. First platoon's wounded were still in the lane, some still alive. He organized evacuation teams, 6 men to recover wounded, while remaining 28 established defensive perimeter. Thomas volunteered for recovery. He moved back into the lane where his brother's platoon had died. Bodies everywhere. Some dead, some wounded, some dying slowly. Nothing could be done. Over the next hour, Anderson's survivors recovered 23 wounded from 1st Platoon, men who would live because Anderson refused to abandon them. They established defensive positions using captured German fighting holes. They sent runners requesting medical evacuation, ammunition resupply, reinforcement. German Panzergrenadiers had withdrawn, but hadn't left. Sporadic fire continued. Tactical stalemate held through afternoon. At 18:30 hours, 4 hours after initial ambush, reinforcements arrived. 3rd Company, 116th Infantry, 100 fresh soldiers plus 2 M4 Sherman tanks. They relieved Anderson's survivors. Medical evacuation began. The wounded were carried back down the lane, same lane that had been kill zone 6 hours earlier. Baker Company's 34 survivors were pulled off the line. They'd taken 94 casualties in 9 minutes and fought 6 hours afterward. They were done. Lieutenant Anderson's last act before medical evacuation was writing his after-action report. Standard procedure. Every engagement required documentation. His report was 3 pages, factual, precise, devastating. He documented the 4 German MG-42 positions, fields of fire, interlocking defensive system. He documented American casualties by name, time, location. He documented tactical lessons. Bocage terrain requires new doctrine, existing training inadequate, intelligence failures catastrophic. Final paragraph. Germans have weaponized geography. Every hedgerow is fortress. Every lane is kill zone. Current tactics produce unacceptable casualties. Recommend immediate doctrinal review. Report went up through division to corps to army. Reached General Omar Bradley's headquarters June 18th. Bradley had been receiving similar reports across Bocage. 29th Infantry Division alone, 3,000 casualties in 2 weeks fighting Norman hedgerows. Other divisions reported similar losses. Tactical problem was universal. German defenders using Bocage terrain to create killing grounds where American firepower superiority meant nothing. Bradley ordered immediate tactical innovation. Result, the Rhino device. Steel prongs welded to Sherman tank hulls, allowing them to punch through hedgerows, finally giving Americans ability to maneuver in Bocage terrain. But innovation came too late for Baker Company. By the time Rhino tanks were operational in July, the men who fought that lane June 13th were scattered, dead, wounded, reassigned. Anderson recovered from shoulder wound, returned to unit in August, fought through France, Belgium, Germany, survived the war. Never stopped writing Sarah. She received 117 letters total, kept every one. They married in December 1945. Their wedding photo shows Anderson in dress uniform, left arm stiff from the shoulder wound, smiling but eyes distant. Sarah told her daughter years later, "Your father came home, but part of him stayed in that lane. I could see it. Every time he was quiet, he was back there. Every time he woke at night, he was back there. The war ended, but he was still fighting." Thomas Chen survived the war, carried his brother's unfinished letter through every subsequent battle, France, Belgium, across Rhine, into Germany. When he returned to Sacramento, November 1945, he gave the letter to his mother. She read it once, never spoke about it. The letter said, "Dear Mom, we're in France now. Everything green and old, hedgerows everywhere. They're bigger than you can imagine. They remind me of walls around our old neighborhood, but stronger. We're moving up a quiet lane today. Officers say light resistance should be straightforward. I'm thinking about home, thinking about the Buick I promised to fix. When I get back, first thing I'll do is..." The letter ended mid-sentence. Blood obscured final words. Weber, the German machine gunner, survived the war. Captured by American forces, August 1944, near Mortain. Post-war interrogation revealed his unit, 352nd Infantry Division, had received explicit orders to establish hedgerow defensive positions along likely American advance routes. 3 weeks to prepare, pre-sighted every field of fire, rehearsed every engagement sequence. Weber's personal diary, captured with him, contained one entry from June 13th, Position 7 successful, enemy casualties estimated 80+, Meyer KIA grenade. Position abandoned 1444, American determination exceeded expectations. We cannot hold. That final sentence, "we cannot hold," appeared in multiple German reports from Normandy. Tactical system that killed 94 Americans in 9 minutes was ultimately futile. German Panzergrenadiers couldn't hold because they lacked strategic depth, reinforcements, air support, logistics. They could win tactical engagements like June 13th ambush, but couldn't win the campaign. American forces adapted. Rhino tanks, revised tactics, overwhelming firepower. By August, German resistance in Normandy collapsed. But men who died in that lane June 13th never saw the victory their sacrifice enabled. Tactical lessons from that engagement entered American doctrine permanently. Hedgerow combat techniques developed in Normandy influenced jungle fighting tactics in Vietnam, urban warfare tactics in Iraq. Any terrain where defenders create interlocking kill zones using environmental features. Fundamental lesson: terrain matters more than technology. Geography can negate firepower superiority. Victory requires adaptation, innovation, willingness to pay brutal costs while learning. Baker Company paid those costs. Their casualties purchased tactical knowledge that saved thousands of lives in subsequent operations. The lane where 94 Americans were killed still exists in Normandy. Paved now, modern asphalt replacing dirt that soaked up blood, June 1944. Hedgerows maintained by local farmers who have no idea what happened there. No memorial, no plaque, no indication this particular stretch of Norman countryside witnessed one of the most brutal small unit engagements of World War II. Visitors drive past without knowing. Geography remembers even if people forget. Subscribe for complete historical analyses that reveal human cost of tactical evolution. 2 videos every day. Next video, December 1944, Hurtgen Forest. American infantry discovered German bunker systems turned 20 square miles of woodland into meat grinder that killed 33,000 in 6 weeks. How survival became mathematical impossibility, and the officer whose after-action report was classified for 40 years because it accused his own command of criminal incompetence. Thomas Chen's final letter to his mother, written 1946, 1 year after returning home. You asked what Robert's last moments were like. I'll tell you what I know. He died instantly. First casualty when firing started. He never knew what hit him. No suffering, no fear, just gone. The letter he was writing, the unfinished one I brought home. I've read it 100 times. He was thinking about you, about home, about the Buick. He was thinking about after the war. He died believing he'd see you again. I think that's as much peace as war allows. He continued, I miss him every day. I see him in every hedgerow. I hear him in every quiet lane. The war ended, but I'm still there, still fighting, still trying to save him. I know that doesn't make sense. I know he's gone, but some part of me will always be 21 years old in that lane, trying to reach him before next burst of fire. I'm sorry I couldn't bring him home. I'm sorry I could only bring his words. I hope that's enough. Their mother kept both letters, Robert's unfinished letter from June 13, 1944, and Thomas's letter from 1946, together in a box she carried rest of her life. When she died 1967, Thomas found the box in her closet. Both letters wrapped in piece of fabric, part of an American flag. Tucked between them was third item, newspaper clipping from July 1944, Sacramento Bee, listing local casualties from Normandy. Robert Chen's name was listed. Next to it, in their mother's handwriting, single note, My son died fighting for a quiet lane in a foreign country. The lane is still there. My son is not, but France is free. That will have to be enough. 4 German machine guns. 94 American casualties, 9 minutes that taught U.S. Army how to fight in Bocage terrain, tactical lessons endured, men who paid for those lessons didn't. That's mathematics of war, knowledge purchased with lives, victory built on casualties, freedom measured in blood soaked into foreign soil. Baker Company, 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Division, learned this June 13, 1944. They paid full price. Rest of us inherited the lesson, whether we remember or not.